Okay, so it's just churning into YouTube now, and we already have attendees coming in as well.
Trying to get good seats.
Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Okay, what's the URL? Can you put it in the chat, please?
Sorry?
Put the URL of the YouTube in the chat.
Sure, yeah, let me do that. Right, so if we can now all go to Twitter, start promoting this, and I'm going to share screen as well. Screen share.
There's a delay between the YouTube, so I guess you couldn't do both of them at the same time.
It's actually running on YouTube now.
Yeah, it is running on YouTube. I'm just going to actually set the presenting button. Oh, so the timer got, I just need to forward a little bit. Okay, cool. Share. Okay, I'm gonna mute everyone now because no matter whatever we say actually goes on YouTube. And if you want to talk to me, either drop me an email or talk to me on WhatsApp. Yeah? Oh, Sheree is here. Hi, hello. I don't think I can hear you. So yeah, so we're actually live on YouTube now, just to let you know. So I'm actually gonna mute everyone if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, I'm gonna mute everyone. I will come back at 3 o'clock. If you go to YouTube now, we're live. We have 8 minutes and 56 seconds to go.
Good.
Okay, I think we should get started. Can you try? I'm gonna unmute all. Okay, I'm ready. And we're live. Yeah.
Shall I start?
Yeah, let me just make sure everyone is here. Yeah, I think I can see everyone. Oh, the panelist and Mel. Okay, cool. Mel, yes, please.
Okay, so welcome to, in my case, Barcelona, and welcome to the second second session in this series by, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can all hear you.
Yeah. Hold on, I have a problem. I'm hearing the YouTube simultaneously.
Yeah, you probably have YouTube on. So if you turn your speaker off, not microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So let's start again. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to Barcelona, which is where I am. Everyone on the panel is almost everyone in a different country. This is the second session in the Frontiers in Virtual Reality series. The third session will be tomorrow by Carolina Cruz Nera, tomorrow at 6 p.m. on Central European time, summertime. So today's session is a panel, which is going to be moderated by Sylvia Pan on XR for bringing people together in times of lockdown and post-COVID. So Sylvia Pan is a lecturer in virtual reality at Goldsmiths, University of London. She obtained her PhD in virtual reality in 2009 at UCL, London, where she was also later a postdoctoral research fellow on several VR projects in both computer science and neuroscience. She's worked in virtual reality for about 15 years. Actually, I first knew her as a master's student. And in the past 2 years, she's received nearly 1 million research funding from HRC in UK and Innovate UK in the area of immersive technology. Her work has been featured multiple times in the media, including BBC Horizon, Radio 4, New Scientist, and the Wall Street Journal. In 2017, she co-led with Marco Gillies the Coursera specialization of virtual reality, with so far nearly 30,000 learners internationally, and she's currently co-leading the MA and MAC in virtual and augmented reality at Goldsmiths. The second panelist is Doron Friedman. He's a professor at the Sami Ofer School of Communications and head of the Advanced Reality Lab at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya in Israel, which is where he's speaking from today. His PhD was in computer science at Tel Aviv University, where he studied automated cinematography and virtual environments. He was a postdoctoral research fellow in the virtual environments of computer graphics at UCL, working on controlling highly immersive virtual reality by thought using brain-computer interfaces. Since 2008, Doron and his lab members have been involved in several national and international projects in the area of telepresence, virtual reality, and advanced human-computer interfaces. His research is highly multidisciplinary. I can say that actually for all of the panelists, and has been published in top scientific journals and peer-reviewed conferences. He also has significant entrepreneurial experience. Anthony Steed's a professor in Department of Computer Science at UCL and is head of the Virtual Environments and Computer Graphics Group. He obtained his PhD in VR in 1996 at the University of London. His research area is real-time interactive virtual environments with particular interest in virtual reality, augmented reality, and novel forms of vision. Also large-scale graphical models, collaborative systems, and networking for highly synchronous telecollaboration. He's got around 300 highly cited publications in the XR and related areas. He's been involved in many national and international research projects and been the leader of some of them. He's also active in technology transfer initiatives and industrial consultancies. He was founder and board member of ASIO Limited and the creators of Chirp. So the first three panelists all have present or past associations with University College London, and so do I, also a past association. The next two panelists are industry panelists. David Haynes is director of the developer ecosystem at ViveX and at HTC Vive. He's part of the team at HTC Vive, primarily responsible for ViveX in Europe, which is a $100 million investment program in global VR and AR startups. He's got extensive startup experience as both an operator, founder, and investor. He was part of the founding team at SoundCloud, helping the company grow from launch to the world's leading online audio platform. He's an experienced business leader with extensive experience of building trusting relationships and turning these into valuable partnerships and successful outcomes. His passion lies in connecting people, ideas, and technology to solve problems and build unforgettable experiences with new technology. Chi Su is the founder and CEO of Nreal, a company devoted to making consumer-facing mixed reality wearables available to all. After getting his PhD in electrical and computer engineering, Chi spent time both at NVIDIA and Magic Leap before leaving to join another startup. From there, he conceived and founded Nreal. Since its founding in 2017, Nreal has been aggressively iterating on their hardware and software and received a lot of press and awards, including Best Startup at CES and Best in Show at the Augmented World Expo. So I'm very happy to introduce these panelists. And now I'm going to hand over to Sylvia Pan, who's going to be the moderator of this panel.
Thank you very much, Mel. Thanks a lot for introducing us as well as organizing this Frontier talk so far. I just want to give you the background. If you haven't been here yet today, Mel gave a talk and it's online, available on YouTube, my channel, and we have so far 2,000 views already. And today is obviously my great pleasure to have all the panelists with me, both from research and industry. This is the only session so far we have planned that with industry partners as well. So I'm just going to, before actually bring everybody's camera on board, I'm just going to show another slide. So other than us, we also have two PhD students and one of my colleagues helping us. So Tara Colin Wood-Williams, Carlos Gonzalez Diaz, and Marco Gillis. They're also here listening in, and they are helping us later on. They'll be chatting through questions from YouTube and else, and on Twitter as well. Okay, so I am just going to stop sharing my screen because today is as a panel discussion, it's very much about the panelists rather than really about our person rather than as well as about our work as well. But I really want to make sure we actually all see each other's faces. So Mel already gave a brilliant introduction of who we are, but I think it's always super useful to also hear from ourselves who we are. Just 3 minutes, who you are, and maybe also where you're from, because I can see most of us are in at home, but Chu is actually in his office. So that's, that's very telling to some extent. So if you can just tell us very quickly who you are, what do you normally do, and how has the current situation had impact on your work? So we start from Chu.
Okay, hi guys, this is Chi. I'm currently in Beijing and in my office. Actually, this is the meeting room. We don't have any office for anyone. So we're building mixed reality glasses. For those who haven't heard of Nreal, we're probably the lightest AR glasses in the market, and you can easily tether this to the cell phones and make that extended screen, and you have so many other kind of interaction and experience on top of that. And also it looks good. This is probably the first VR and AR headset doesn't look black, right? So, and yeah, we've been getting a lot of attention since we debuted early last year, and we want to keep inspiring people and getting feedbacks from people to really improve on this. I think this is very exciting for the next decade. Things are going to evolve very fast. And speaking of COVID-19, it does hurt us a little bit, especially at the very beginning. Everybody, everything is shutting down, and we cannot even resume our manufacturing. And luckily, being in China, we managed to pass that phase earlier than the rest of the world, and nowadays we're all getting back to the normal phase. We still need to wear a mask, but other than that, it looks quite normal. So we're ramping up our production, hoping we can really launch much more quantity in near future. And we're gonna do a fully commercialization this year. And luckily starting with Korea, Japan, and expand to Europe, to the US. So that does hurt our plan a little bit. Because we cannot kind of move on with the same pace, especially for the hardware manufacturer. But in the meantime, I think we're passing that phase, and everybody kind of realized, okay, without digital transformation as a must is going to be a trend going forward. So I think we will see a very strong rebound after we get back to the normal business, and people are going to involve a little bit more with virtual interaction, virtual conferencing, all the other stuff as well.
Excellent. Can we next, please? Sorry, I'm just going at order of my computer screen. I know it doesn't make much sense, but that's how normally a panel goes. Let's follow whatever feels right. So Anthony, can we please have you also give us a small introduction?
Hello. Yes, I'm, as Mel helpfully pointed out, been doing this for a long time. So originally, virtual reality research was really just a case of trying to make the silly things work back in the mid-90s through the 2000s and so on. But very early on, we realized that although there was a lot of technology challenges, the really interesting thing was what you did with the systems. And we've always done work on telepresence, telecollaboration, but really that's become the focus over the last couple of years, or 3 to 5 years, is that you can use virtual reality not just as a place where you play a game or going to see a simulated place, but as a sort of transport from somewhere else. So that's my focus at the moment, is the telepresence into live places and the interest. And there's lots of issues around that. In fact, I'm talking on this seminar series next week, and my focus will be technical challenges, and most of them are around what is VR going to be for in the future, given that we want to use it for more purposes than just playing games. Not that the games are bad, the games are great, the headsets are great, but really we want these things to integrate with our lives quite profoundly, and we want to be able to wear them all the time. And those Nreal glasses are not just not black, they're actually look small and light, and you could possibly at least carry them around all day, if not wear them all day. So how are we situated? So I'm at home. I've been at home for 2 months. We're not expecting our university, UCL, to let us back in the lab for another 3 to 4 months, which means that in a parallel activity, we've been trying to figure out how to do science now. So if I get a chance, I will talk about how the community is evolving to try and not just distribute experiments, but also figuring out what's a better experiment to run than our usual lab-based experiments. Because in the long run, lab-based experiments may be difficult, right? It may not only be practically difficult because of social distancing, but ethically difficult because we'll be inviting people to travel to come to the lab, and that in London, we don't expect free flow of traffic for many months, possibly until next year, for example. So that's a big challenge. And you can imagine that as in a university, we're thinking about all sorts of things, such as how do we exploit this technology, for example, to teach somewhere between 10 and 20,000 students next year in various configurations, because we have meetings of 3, sometimes up to hundreds, near 1,000. So that's a big challenge. And the XR isn't ready yet for that, but at least we can start to support our own activities in the next year.
We'll see if XR will be ready or not. Things apparently happen quite quickly now. Doran, do you mind introducing yourself next, please?
Yeah, hi. How are you doing? So basically, I'm based now in Israel. I'm actually also now in the office, working from Herzliya, north of Tel Aviv. My lab in IDC, first of all, I was fortunate to do a postdoc in London with Mel, and Anthony was there also. So I'm also kind of been around for some time. And one of our expertise, kind of our claim to fame, is integrating virtual reality and brain-machine interfaces, or brain-computer interfaces. which I'm going to talk about in June, neurophysiological interfaces, but it's less relevant for today. And the other thing, in the last few years, we've been doing more VR with AI, using the recent trends in deep learning to improve virtual humans. And as far as the corona goes, so I think things are quite optimistic right now in Israel, but we did have some kind of almost a complete lockdown. So we did send up some devices to a few dozen students, Oculus Go, Oculus Quest, whatever we could do, so that they could work with each other to carry out experiments. And I think I just want to share with you, to the amount of uncertainty. So, just recently I talked to two medical doctors about how can we do VR experiments in times of Corona. And one of them, who is actually in charge of infections in a medical department, said no problem, just do some disinfection with a wipe between participants, and that's it. We do a lot of that in hospital. And the other medical doctor said, by no means don't switch the device from one person to another. We don't know, it could be dangerous, it could be infectious. Don't do experiments in 2020 at all. You can use UV for sanitation, but the rays are straight, and it could be that some small viruses will hide in the crooks of the device. So, I guess there's a lot of uncertainty also in our space, not only in everything around us with this crisis. So, over here things seem optimistic, but yeah, we all have to be ready for a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, I guess, everybody all acting pretty quick with this. I was actually really impressed with, how things actually change quickly, especially in the domain of XR. And actually on that note, I would like Dave to introduce yourself. And also, I was really impressed by the HTC Engage conference that just happened kind of, 2 weeks after the rest of the world was in lockdown. So Dave, please introduce yourself and also, yeah, tell us about the Engage conference as well.
Yeah, hi, my name's Dave Haynes, and yeah, first of all, thanks Sylvia for organising this. I'm humbled to be in the presence of such awesome co-panelists. Yeah, I'm not from academia, so I'm probably the least smart person on the panel, but hopefully I can bring some experiences to the table. So just to describe what I do, and thanks for the introduction, Mel. So I split my role in two different areas. One is I head up a program that we run called ViveX. And as Mel mentioned, this is a program to invest in startups across the XR ecosystem. So, a lot of that is VR. We're looking into enterprise solutions at the moment, also a lot of developer tools and just kind of stuff that we need to build out infrastructure. But we also do, we look at AR. We've done a couple of brain-computer interface companies. So ViveX is really, yes, we want to kind of plug those companies into what HTC does as a company today, but it's also to help us kind of imagine what is coming in the next 2, 3, 4 years down the pipe. So if any people are looking, quick plug, we are kind of still actively making investments through COVID, as well as supporting existing portfolio. Second thing I do is focusing on developer ecosystems. So, as a company, we know that we don't just sell hardware to, end customers, whether they're consumers or businesses. They need content applications and solutions. So part of my role is to help those developers build successfully for Vive. And also push some of our new kind of SDKs and technologies. So, things like ProEye, which has eye tracking. We actually teamed up with Goldsmiths earlier this year to do a whole session around what you can do with eye tracking, analytics, and foveated rendering and the like. So that's what I do. Where I am, I'm actually in my home just outside London. So I think Corona has had an interesting effect. As a business, it's been interesting because a lot of my work is actually meeting people and going to events. So I'll talk about that in a minute. From a kind of macro perspective, I mean, I think it's an interesting space, because I think the current situation actually has the potential to catalyze interest and usage in XR technologies. We've certainly seen a surge in demand for headsets, I think both for consumers. During this time, people want a way to escape, and they want, ways to entertain themselves, whilst they can't do anything else. And I think VR is a perfect solution. Hopefully we can do even more to capitalize on that. But in many areas, actually demand for VR is kind of, outstripping the logistics of supply. So that's very positive. In enterprise, I think it's a mixed story. There was a lot of on-premise use of kind of VR and AR, which obviously, kind of relates to whether people can get back into, factories and workplaces and labs. But actually, we've seen a strong growing demand for an interest in solutions that help people be more productive from home in VR. So whether that's remote meetings, whether it's, architects and construction workers collaborating on plans, there's or whether it's just, simple people doing, kind of remote work together. So we've seen a huge kind of demand in that, which I hope will carry over into the kind of the coming months. And then, yeah, Sylvia, you mentioned the events. So, and I can expand upon this a bit later, more in depth, but we actually, for us as a company, we have events like MWC, GDC, South by Southwest, all of these have been cancelled. And we have our own developer events as well. So actually, it was our China team that was first to really kind of step up on this, but they took the initiative and said, hey, with everyone cancelling events, well, we can use our own technology to like replicate those events and even go better than what you can do in a physical event. So we had a virtual event that was called the V2EC that we hosted in Engage. And now we followed that up with a series of 3 events here in the UK with Immerse UK. And we even did one of our Vivex investor events fully in virtual reality as well, where we had 8 startups pitching to over 20 VCs. So yeah, I can go into that in more detail as the panel progresses, but yeah, we're really trying to kind of eat our own dog food and start to virtualize some of the the work that we do in the physical world.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm just going to also use a minute to quickly introduce myself. I'm a lecturer in VR. I normally do research and teaching in VR. So I'll be giving a talk next week on virtual characters. That's my research area. But also spend lots of time teaching master students at Goldsmiths in virtual and augmented reality. And when COVID happened, is that most of the students are basically all went back to their home country. So we have to move a lot of the teaching online, like Anthony and Darren had to. But at the same time, we were actually able to attend lots of amazing international conferences in this area that I would say to some extent the students really benefited from it. Otherwise there was no way we're going to attend IEEE VR, which was organized by Anthony Steed, which I hope he will be telling us a bit more about later as well. So I think, it is obviously a challenge for everyone, but at the same time is also an interesting opportunity for us to kind of connect with each other, connect with people from different places in ways that would have not been possible before. And I hope whatever the connection we harvest during this time will actually continue to survive the situation as well. So actually, let's all forget about COVID for a second. You kind of talked about your work before COVID as well, but I just want to give everybody a minute to tell us about what have you been doing before COVID in your research or business that's really about using technology to bring people together. Who do you want to start first? Anthony, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, we've been working on sort of collaborative VR systems for a long time, over 20 years. And at some point I will do a retrospective on some of those early platforms, because it's quite clear that the internet is not built to do real-time virtual reality in quite a fundamental way. So right now in the lab we are doing we're doing everything from neuroscience of cognition and body, how you interact with your body and systems and how that can be supported, to therefore what's needed in next generation controllers, down to let's build our own protocols from the fiber up to do virtual reality better, because operating systems, internet, graphics cards were all built to make games and show web pages. I'm exaggerating, but if you really want to do virtual reality really well, then we can you'll need a display that's 1000 hertz. You'll need point-to-point fiber connections with none on the operating system in the way. So we build those things in the lab. So that's the bit of our work we can't do at the moment. We can't go in the lab. We can't go on the optical networks. We can't test those pieces of hardware which are rather specialist. We've built our own graphics cards in the past, and our own interfaces and our own software, pretty much a whole stack. So we're focusing now on more on the sort of social interfaces, and also particular problems about the metaverse and how do you expand from the current platforms to something which is more open, more portable between devices and so on. So again, we've done a little bit of work over the years on that, but it's sort of coalescing around some real challenges to the hardware manufacturers, the platforms we use, and also the sort of content creators, because there's a lot of interest in this area but no common platform. And I'm happy to talk more about that later, early things that are happening, but that's a big interest, and there's many different sort of aspects of that, from hardware, software, and internet technologies.
Sure. Do you have some comments on that? Actually, you are very much started off from the hardware side, right? And the success of Unreal actually, largely is because of that.
Yeah, I mean, from the hardware perspective, how to say this? So what we want to build is a really probably the first consumer AR glasses in the market ever. Because if you look at all the other existing headsets, HoloLens or Magic Leap, they're more for enterprise and they're very pricey, right? And we get a lot of people's attention, but it's not for the real customers. And we want to build something that's lighter and easier to use, more intuitive, and people can really enjoy. I'm not going to say this is going to be the glasses in 10 years. But I think, we want to build like a product for AR glasses where people can really, occasionally they can wear on their face, when they're in the subway, or they're on the plane, they're in their home or at office. So this is not an easy job to do, because you look at the whole supply chain, it wasn't there, especially when we're talking about some key components there. So we gradually to figure out how to assemble a team that can really excel all the key technologies for AR, VR. And then we have this great product. I think, our team made a great job building a really lightweight glasses. And we managed to really get people's attention with that. And we've start talking with different partners, because I think, hardware is only the first step. Once you have the right hardware, you need to talk about what is the right interaction, because this is so new. And when we talk to, when we really give our glasses to those customers, we realize, okay, a lot of things we thought that are right and easier to understand is not. So we get a lot of interesting feedback from the real customers and how they actually interact with our glasses in general. I bet, VR is the same thing. But again, we are talking about when you plug into the phone, we realize the customer has a lot of resistance to the new product. They're still used to, even though for the smartphone, it took them such a long time for most of the people to really get, understand that and get used to it. And nowadays we're talking about, hey, there's going to be a new thing, right? Whether it's a VR or AR, that's going to be the new platform maybe in the next 2 decades. And it's definitely going to cause a lot of resistance. So how do you really bypass that, make people get excited about wearing them on a daily basis, while they can really kind of overcome those kind of hurdle when they learn some new stuff. And luckily, we think, initially you need to get them interested, and you also need to get them understand how you can transit from what they're so excel at this moment, which is the mobile phone, this ecosystem onto the glasses. So that's why we built Nebula. We built a software operating system, making sure that even though we don't have a lot of 3D application to begin with, you can leverage all the existing 2D applications right out of the box. And everything gonna look so much bigger and you literally have a virtual 3D projector with you all the time. But on top of that, you can do so many other 3D interaction contents as well. And it should be easy to port between VR and AR and vice versa. So that's how we really position that. And that's what we've been doing before the COVID-19. I think we have a great debut at CES this year. People finally kind of get excited about this, and different telcos get excited about this. Paired us with 5G, they think, this is one of the key use cases when they promote 5G for the mass consumer. So I definitely going to see for the next couple of years, whether it's a VR or AR, it's going to be a driving force for 5G because the cell phone screen is not getting any bigger. And 5G definitely unleash a lot of new bandwidth. And we need some way to really consume that kind of bandwidth. Having the second display that's tethered to the cell phone and leverage all the 5G throughput over the cell phone, I think is the best way in the near future, for the near, maybe next couple years at least, whether it's a VR or AR. So very excited. And
yeah. Completely agree. I think be it VR or AR is really about, the opportunity presented by 5G. We really have a new chance of using these technologies to really bring people together. Dave, do you have anything to add on that from HTC perspective? Oh, you muted.
Yeah, mute.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from a hardware perspective, there's still a lot of things that we're working on just to decrease the friction and make these into more appealing form factors and more accessible for more people. So I think that will continue in all the obvious ways. Obviously, we are very excited by 5G. We have a number of kind of carrier partnerships, and we also, as early as kind of January last year, launched our 5G Smart Hub. So I think that's an ongoing topic. I do feel like we're probably at the cusp, maybe not this year, but next year feels like we're at a tipping point almost for the kind of the next generation of devices, like where we've seen constant iterations, slightly better screen resolution, slightly better processors. I think we've kind of almost got to that point where we're kind of 1.8, and now we're going to tip over into generation 2. But I'll leave that to my colleagues in Taiwan who are looking after the product roadmap. I think my role has been focusing on, well, how do we help the developers to make the most of the current devices? And I think a lot of the choices there is how do they then bridge, there's a certain kind of audience and a certain hardware limitation that you have to develop for today. But how do you build a business that is kind of mitigating against that and then still looking towards the next generation? So, just to give an example of that, when it comes to, the topic today of online, bringing people together, well, the challenge is you can't bring everyone together in the world if they don't all have VR headsets. So a lot of the platforms we work with are thinking about, okay, we want to build a VR first product, but how does that relate into AR? How does that relate into desktop? How do you take a 2D stream from a virtual space so that other people can enjoy the event that you're at? So it's been a lot about how do people take advantage of cross-platform while still kind of building towards what is the most possible immersive experience. And if I think about some of the platforms, actually what got me into the VR space in the first place was social VR and some of the things that were possible. So one of the first companies I invested in, this was before HTC, was a company called The Wave VR that do virtual concerts and virtual events in VR. Now, if you look at just a couple of weeks ago, you can see how, like, I made that investment a couple of years ago. You can now see that's a huge trend. You have Fortnite throwing concerts with virtual performers like Travis Scott. That had an audience of 30 million people. Like that's insane to bring 30 million people. Now, imagine if that number of people could be experiencing that in VR. I think that's pretty special.
Fantastic. And I saw Doran nodding a lot, and I also actually know Doran's very early work. When I just joined the UCL lab, he was the one who basically published the first paper on which basically I could control an avatar in VR with EEG cap. So yeah, so I guess at the time, consumer access and everything is not really on Doran's agenda. Do you want to chip in something here, Doran?
Maybe, I'm not sure if now is the time, but do you want to share some slides, and maybe that will lead to the next?
Yeah.
So
sure.
I think I have like my second slide over there.
You're on the second. I'm going to share a screen now, and I'll make sure I share my
I want to
sound
suggest
as well.
some thoughts. Yeah, next one. I want to suggest some thoughts about about bringing people together in VR. So I'll start with very simple stuff, and then I might have some more, you know, advanced observations. But maybe Sylvia will stop me in the middle. We'll see how it goes. But
I will.
yeah, we can do it. Don't worry, don't worry. So basically, this is what we want to be experiencing. And, you know, this is what a lot of people right now in the world or, you know, have been missing with all this lockdown. The idea of being in a close, being together with other people, you know, in this case, a romantic situation could be, you know, other moments, of course, with, you know, your children, your family, your best friends. You see, it's a multi-sensory experience. They're smelling the wine, and if you notice, they're a little bit touching each other, but it's not just about not being able to touch. There's a lot of other things going on. Now, next slide, please. So, and this is the mediated version, you know, with telecommunication. And, you know, it's fine. I mean, we can, of course, you can have great experiences with Zoom or video conferencing, but, you know, if you, you know, you can, well, it is different from the previous slide. And then if you go to the next slide, so what we want to be able to do with VR is have it kind of more like the first thing and less like the second thing. So you can see, especially in the top picture, an illustration of what it would be like to have an intimate moment in VR. Of course, it's not like the real thing, but it's also very, very different from the, you know, desktop / mobile phone video conference. This is actually a snapshot from our series of research of studies on intimate romantic relationships and flirting in VR. Of course, it looks cartoonish, but in VR, you have a really good experience and you're using your whole body. And this is the kind of things that I think we're all missing. You know, of course, for information, it's no problem. We can use text, we can use email, sometimes we can use video conference. So that's kind of just the teaser. And the next slide is where it starts getting deep, but maybe you want to get to this later. I don't know, Sylvia.
Yeah, let's have a chunk at a time. So yeah. I think that's, yeah, I just want to add one note. So we have lots of people listening from YouTube as well. We have 146 watching us now. We have 32 attendees. So please, if you have any questions, do post them on YouTube, and Carlos and Tara, if you see anything interesting, do put them on the chat so that, yeah, I'll be able to see them. Okay, so we all heard how amazing XR technology is, and as Darren pointed out, it is still not the same as face-to-face interaction. So what do you think among, you know, the panelists of industry and researchers, what do you think is the biggest challenge? There's the biggest challenge, or what is really missing with XR technologies in bringing people together? Anyone want to first say something? Maybe I'll start then. So actually, one of my PhD work, I've been doing basically experimental studies about how people kind of talk to each other in real life and how much of that we can capture and put them in VR. And one of the research study I actually ran is about the effect of blushing. So apparently in the social interaction, blushing has an effect of making people feel like more connected to each other, or they're more likely to forgive each other. But actually also the effect, very importantly, is subconscious. So we don't actually notice someone who is blushing, but we're more likely to forgive them nevertheless. So the point is, I want to raise here is that in real life social interaction, there's so much going on through all sorts of nonverbal and verbal channels, subconscious or conscious or whatever. I mean, it's like we can't actually capture them 100%. We don't even know what we're trying to capture. So how do we capture them? Even the top neuroscientists, they can't say 100%. They can have a list of, you know, channels through which we're interacting with each other, right? You know, and then we're talking about the fidelity of actually capturing them and all that. So I think, in a sense, as a, you know, half psychologist, half computer scientist, I think the biggest challenge for me is like, we, no matter how hard we try, can only capture a fraction of real life social communication, right? And we can try a bit more, but then there's the priority as well, right? We can't probably transmit in real time all the signal we're capturing as well. So for me, that is the biggest challenge from a sort of psychology perspective. Anybody else want to add or, you know, give your perspective? Yeah.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. The, you know, capture of people is probably the biggest challenge, and it's part that's missing because one of the reasons we struggle with Zoom is I might know Sylvia Doron quite well for prior interactions, but it's not like interacting in the real world. I add a second thing, which is that most social interaction we have in our real life takes place in places we are familiar with, and actually are very highly modified by us to use them. I hate going to meetings in places I've never been and nobody knows, right? So one of my least favorite things at the university is getting sent to a lecture theatre to lecture in that I've never been in before, a building I've never been in before. Not because it's frightening, it's just because it's unfamiliar. There'll probably be something go wrong. So I'm missing people, but I'm also missing places and things. So I had several discussions with my students, for example, on Zoom, and they're great until I try and reach for a statistics book off the shelf, because and they're not there. They're not over there. I've got all my fiction over there because this is my home office. And there, my office is quite effective as a tool for me to use. Mine is very cluttered. It's got equipment in it and so on. So social interaction takes place in places which make me more effective as a communicator, as a teacher, and so on. So I'm missing those. And actually, despite there being lots of great social VR systems, they're mostly for playing games where they're a bit like destination games you go and play now, bowling, Laser Quest, and so on. But a lot of fun playing Laser Quest recently in VR. So not only people, but the collection of places being familiar, and that may be replaced by us making good places where we are just as effective as we were in the places we used to inhabit. But that is a key thing for me, is either I'm going to reproduce my office, but that is a tough problem because I want to be able to pull the books off the shelf and then hand them to people. And I can imagine digital analogies of those, but that's the task. That's the type of task that I think we forget actually is really valuable in our communication.
Yeah. So it's about the people, also about the places as well. Chu, do you have something to add from AR perspective? Oh, you're muted.
I totally agree. I mean, it's hard to capture those kind of very subtle responses from different channels, and we are actually working with a video conferencing company to have this AR, workspace while doing AR conferencing. And something we're trying to mimic is how we really have a real actual conferencing. For example, when we're doing Zoom conferencing, we see tiny windows, lining up together, and they're switching. So in case we're actually in the same room, what you do is you actually know people sitting around you, and you actually memorize the kind of direction. So if you want to talk to someone, or you want to actually monitor what his response, you actually turn to that people, but you cannot do the same thing in Zoom. So what we're trying to create is, having an AR conferencing platform where people are sitting around you as if they're in the meeting room. And each one will have this kind of video portal, and you can easily turn to different people. And we can share a bigger screen on top of everybody, where people will easily share and elaborate. But in the meantime, it's probably the closed one look like a real conference. And eventually, with some AI algorithms, you can really just have the segmentation of your people, just bypass and filter out backgrounds. So at some point, you kind of treat yourself, okay, this is actually like a real conferencing room.
Fantastic. I think it's really, we're very much sort of our spatial memory is really, really important, especially in a conversation where there's a lot going on. We really rely on our spatial memory quite a lot. Dave, is HTC having something similar, or what do you think is the biggest challenge in this area from your perspective?
So maybe just to touch on a few things that Anthony also mentioned. I mean, through doing these virtual events, and we've done a few across different platforms, and also just going into various different, meeting, VR meeting solutions. The first thing that people comment on is their avatars. Like, people really want to kind of, like, people spend a lot of time before the event, they turn up 10 minutes late to the event because it's almost like they had to get dressed, just as they were entering the room. So people really care about that stuff. And it's not just from a vanity perspective, but it's interesting. We did these events in Engage, and when you're doing a kind of a 90-minute, 2-hour event, you have some people that just naturally want to take their headset off because they need to go and get a glass of water or go and go to the toilet. And then the problem is, if you're sat in the audience, you've suddenly got somebody who's like kind of, you know, a crumpled headset, and their avatar looks very, you know, strange. And it's also, you know, on different platforms, if you look at Engage as a platform, they've really tried to go down the route of having very realistic avatars. So that the challenge there is, you know, there's this kind of uncanny valley where, you know, as everyone is well researched of, you know, if it doesn't look perfect, then it makes some people feel uncomfortable. But then you swing all the way to you know, another platform that we've invested in called VR Chat. Now VR Chat goes completely the other way, and it's completely fantastical. So I was watching it was a virtual awards ceremony, and you know, like of the 4 judges, like 2 were robots and 1 was a fantasy creature, and you know, that goes the other way. And I think at the moment, like until we get to kind of, you know, proper volumetric and, you know, kind of holographic solutions, which are going to require much more bandwidth and kind of better technology than we have today, I think you kind of almost have to pick one as a platform and then design around the challenges that you have. And I think what's been great over the last like month or two is, whereas a lot of these platforms were leaving some of these decisions, or they were accepting that they had imperfections in their current solution, they've had influxes of people coming in, and not just the VR enthusiast crowd, but like, you know, the general population is now coming into their platform. So I think this has really catalyzed the speed at which some of these developers will now address some of those problems. You know, and it's possible to kind of just have workarounds for now until the technology gets better. So yeah, I think that is one challenge, but it's you know, there's some which are getting addressed now.
Yeah, the representation, the photorealism, how far do we go? You know, all that has been definitely a big challenge.
Well,
Darren, do you have any? Sorry, Dave, do you want
I was just going to say, one other thing to say is just friction. So you know, I've now got my setup that I can jump into a VR meeting or event or whatever, like, you know, within seconds. I'm familiar with the platform, so I know where to meet up. But when you're doing that for the first time or even the 10th time, it's actually really difficult. You've got to think about, oh, I need to load up my computer. I've got to download the latest update. I need to take my headset off to find the password and the username of the room that somebody set up. Like, there's all these, I mean, we still suffer with Zoom and Skype, right? There's still that 5 minutes of like, oh, hang on, I'm on mute, you know, like you times that by 10 for VR. And again, I think we've now set down a challenge to the developers to say, look, you need to kind of, you know, work around that. So just really small things can help. So if I take, we now have a platform that I can talk more about called Vive Sync, which is just a very simple, straightforward meetings and collaboration tool. Now, one of the things that we did there, we have pass-through cameras on our devices. So rather than make somebody come out of headset and then type in what they want, we've implemented a QR code system. So it's integrated with Outlook. You get your VR meeting thing. Now, all I need to do is put on my, you know, Vive Focus Plus or my Cosmos or something, go into pass-through mode, and I can just look at the QR code, and that takes me into the space directly. So that sounds like a really small thing, but those integrations have all of a sudden made the pain of joining a VR meeting, you know, like it's reduced by 50%.
Yeah, great. So yeah, technology is definitely improving. You know, more and more people are using it, and that's all great news. Darren, do you have anything to add on the challenge in this space?
I think if it's possible to show the next slide, and especially maybe we can even cut short some of the points.
Yeah.
But I think there's one thing. So, and I also see some questions from the audience. We can start getting to these soon. That's not mine. Anyway, this one. So I'm not going to go over the first 2 points, although I think they're very interesting. Maybe if we'll have time. I want to start with the third point, because the first 2 points are about 220. But I think so. I see also questions from the audience about VR and AR. And I think in my world, there's VR, there's AR, and there's telepresence. And telepresence is maybe even the most interesting. Of course, eventually it's all one ecosystem and it's all going to blend. That's why we call it XR. But telepresence is, of course, bringing people feeling together in the physical space, but remotely. And which, of course, has been used many years in the military and, you know, medical applications. But maybe you can can you show the beaming project video?
Yeah, sure. Let me just get out of Here I have it open already, so.
So we've come to University College London for a bit of a meeting about a technology called beaming. We're meeting Professor Mel Slater here. You're heavily involved in the project.
Right, yes.
And also joining us is Dr. Mavi Sanchez-Vives. Good morning, Mavi.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. So, Mel, what's all this about?
This project called Beaming allows someone to instantaneously transport themselves physically to another location. So Mavi here is in Barcelona. Hello, Mavi. And she's joined us and she's embodied through this robot. So there's a lot of technology going on here across the internet. Her body is tracked. Her movements are translated to the movements of the robot. When she speaks, you hear her speak, and she can see us in full 3D stereo from the eyes of the robot.
So Mavi, let me get this straight. You're not here, you're in Barcelona.
Yes, I'm in Barcelona.
You seem to me to be in London.
Well, in a way, I'm in London.
What's it like at your end?
I'm in a lab. It's similar to the one where you are, or in a room where there is some equipment around and also a camera, although I cannot see it because I'm wearing a head-mounted display, and actually the environment in which I can see is the one where you are in London.
So you can see me, you're looking at me now.
Yes, I can see you. Also, I can see my hands when I lift them, and then I can look around. So when I move around, I can see the room or the walls and everybody there. So I could say I feel there in a way.
Should we do a high five?
All right.
Thanks, Mavi. Good meeting you.
Right. So thanks, Sylvia. You can stop sharing the video. So I think that video illustrates more than many other things we could talk about. It's a project called Beaming, which, as you saw, Mel, of course, was heading, and Anthony was very much involved, and myself. And we've imagine this was 210 to 215. So when we started it, there was not only no Vive, Oculus, no Vive, but even no depth cams, or almost no depth cameras. So I think we should, I think that's where we want to go. And, it's just a matter of budget. It's nothing, I mean, it's just really, it's just a matter of industry. I'm talking to my industry friends there, like HTC and Qi and all the others who are not here. It's just a matter of putting a lot of budget, and I think it's going to be worth it. Forget AR, telepresence first, and all the rest will come.
Yeah, so Dave, as an investor and all the other investors watching, that's what Darren is the person to go to.
And Anthony can mention a few words about the Avatar Prize, which I don't know how they're doing these days, but it's an interesting initiative.
Yeah, it's just worth noting that the sort of beaming scenario is quite similar to the objective of one of the upcoming X Prizes, which X Prize is famous for the sort of unattended robot, but it is telepresence through robotics prize, which is running at the moment. I'm one of the judges, and it's running through this year and next year. And this is the scenario. It's remote people in virtual reality controlling robots to operate in various social scenarios.
So we have quite a lot of questions coming in, but I just want to probably, ask you guys one last question is, how do you think social VR compares with video conferencing? Because that's basically, for most of us, that's the kind of two mode of way of meeting people we can have for the next 1 or 2 months. So any, tips or advice on that?
I have a few points in the slide I can do, which I'm happy to go over, and actually would be happy to get some feedback.
Yeah, shall I put your slides on?
Yeah, thanks. So basically, I think, previous one, forget this one.
Okay, let me try to go to.
So basically, you know, today we are using things like Allspace and Mozilla has with the students, and we're meeting there. And Dave and Anthony can tell about the events they're going to. I just want to make, you know, even though these worlds are terribly limited, and of course, you know, don't get me started about the limitations of these worlds. Already, I think a lot of people who go there are surprised, because you do get a sense of this feeling together. So we don't have time to go into it in depth, but I suggest so that the theoretical, first of all, there's things like, you know, turn taking, which you need a full body and gaze, which works better. So there's a lot of small things which are different between social VR, multi-user VR, and Zoom. But I think the best way to approach this is from a brain perspective, and we know the brain. So just one point here to throw. Basically, think about it. Your brain does not have, probably, as far as we know, does not represent geometry, you know, in Cartesian coordinates or any other thing. It's much more task-oriented and goal-oriented in terms of affordances. Now, to put it, and you can see the diagram about this so-called peripersonal space, which you can investigate further. Now, think about it. Now, let's assume that you are like me, sitting in front of a laptop. So the laptop is in your peripersonal space. You can touch it, okay? I can touch the screen. But these little faces that I see of Sylvia and Anthony, they are not in my space, and I know that. So there's no consequence. I know I cannot slap them, I cannot kiss them. Of course, I wasn't going to do any of these things, even if I've seen them. But these affordances are very deep-rooted in our brain. And in VR, we are fooling the brain. We know we have the potential to communicate, to touch with other people. So I think that's a very important point. And we do have an understanding of the brain that would allow to develop this theoretical understanding. You know what, I'm gonna skip the other point I was gonna make, because I'm more curious to hear my co-panelists.
Yeah, sure. I actually put a summarize of what I think, you know, pros and cons of social VR. I put it on Twitter as well. And pretty much, I think most people agree with the list. Social VR is good because you don't have to dress up or do your hair. And it has spatial audio, which allows breakout groups. And you can use spatial body language so that when we talk in group, we know who is actually the one talking. And you can use more subtle nonverbal cues like the one Dorenz has been mentioning. And it's also less real life distraction. You can actually focus, and it's less in your face. For some people, they feel social VR is actually less stressful than a Zoom meeting, which is more full on to some people. And also, as Dave mentioned, I think in Engage, you can import 3D objects as well, so that you can actually, this is actually something even better than a real life meeting sometimes. If you're talking about virtual object that doesn't actually exist. I'm sure Chi has project on this as well with the AR glasses. But however, there are also things you shouldn't be really using social VRs. For instance, the problem is that if you have a meeting, you want to engage people who don't have VR headsets, then there's no point. But hopefully cheaper devices such as the Unreal glasses will soon solve this problem. And secondly, I cannot spend more than 1 hour in Quest in one go, right? So it's quite heavy. Probably there are tricks can make this less heavy, more sort of balanced in terms of weight, but still, I think it's still quite a sort of closed experience. And also for me, I really like seeing people's faces. I think that's really important. And no, I mean, apart from the Engage platform, you can have kind of face-like thing. Other platforms so far, they're more sort of cartoon-like avatars. So I feel the relationship we connect, we manage to build in social VR doesn't really carry out sort of, you know, apply on our real life situations. And also, I mean, social VR is almost impossible to take notes the way we normally do. So I think that's kind of the downside. Any other points anyone want to add to the list here? Or just, you know, one is the best to use VR and one is best to use video conferencing.
Yeah, point number one. I'm not sure I dressed up or did my hair for this Zoom call. But,
maybe you're just naturally looking smart. That's fine.
Yeah. Just make it. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, go ahead, Anthony.
This is one of the problems of Zoom, right? So just to add something to Sylvia's list, there's some of this has been well known for a long time, and several has got examples of turn taking, for example, in Zoom is really hard because when I finish speaking, when in the real world, I tend to look towards the person I expect to see next, and that's a very subtle cue. Yeah. And it's completely gone in Zoom, and there are lots of these, right? There's been lots of sort of quite deep qualitative and quantitative review of socials, of failings of video that goes back to the the 90s and beyond. And I was quite amused by the avatars falling asleep by crumpling onto the floor, because I personally implemented a button that said I'm away from keyboard in one of my early social VR systems. That didn't happen. So you didn't see crumpled avatars, because it was quite funny when it happened. I would just say that my experience, we use these for years, and we don't use social VR for everything, but I find it works a lot better with people I know. And it may be because I don't need those social cues. And I could talk a little bit about the conference we ran. The IEEE Virtual Reality Conference was online shortly after lockdown. We had already suggested having a workshop on how to run the conference in the future in VR, and suddenly we had to do it it had to be done by Carl Johnson and his team at very short notice. But there again, I found that that's had its pluses and minuses. One, it was very accessible for people around the world, as Sylvia has hinted at, but it's quite hard to meet new people there. So if somebody new comes up to you, effectively it's just a voice in social VR, and you have a chat. So it's a little hard to understand where they're coming from. Are they a student? Are they an aged professor? Are they from your field? Do you recognize them? Because they've probably got the wrong name tag on, because they probably lied about their email address to sign up and things like that. So I think it is great for teams that work, and I spend a lot of time with my students in social VR, but the video is still better, I think. For the key thing is for meeting new people and new audiences, I think.
Yeah, I think two interesting points on my side. When it comes to virtual events, one of the great things for me has just been bumping into people. Quite often we go to conferences not just because of the content. If it's just slides and a person talking, we can do that over Zoom. But what's great is when I'm meeting someone in VR, like we can, what we did was, after we gave presentations at our events, we had networking, and there's different areas of the room with spatial audio implemented. So you can just go and like listen into somebody's conversation, you can bump into somebody. And probably one of the biggest values I had out of the events was that, like it's meeting new people, making a connection, and then maybe we follow up in a Zoom, but I wouldn't have met that person otherwise. I think the other thing when it comes to smaller meetings, I fully agree. There's some limitations like note taking and things like that. I think that's where things like AR and mixed reality will kind of start to come into it, because I can have the meeting overlaid on my kind of real world productivity setup. But yeah, I think one thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked, well, two things that sometimes get overlooked is, one, we tend to focus on what are the limitations, whereas I think we should focus on what are the things that are actually not just better than a Zoom call, but better than real life. At the VEC conference, to kind of, in the Alvin made a keynote speech at the beginning where to get people's attention and really to hammer home the point. At one point we had a train crash through the screen, and you saw people at the thing like do that. We also put people into hazmat suits to, make the point that, this is a space where we can do other things. But more practically, if we were doing a product presentation, we've uploaded assets into the platform now. We have our own room. We can just show people our products and say, hey, look, this is the new Vive Cosmos, check it out. So I think that there's a number of points where doing things in VR can just be much better. But it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I'm doing a VR event, let's just have, slides and speakers. And we certainly did that, but it's a challenge to think about how we can make them even better. And then the last point is just, we tend to think about meetings of just kind of, productivity meetings, but we've invested in a number of platforms that have very kind of specific use cases. So there's one that we're working with now that work with the oil and gas sector. What they're able to do, they're able to bring entire teams from across the world right next to a kind of a cliff face, or they could have somebody out drilling below the surface and bringing up samples, and rather than get everyone on site, you can bring those samples into the space. There's another company we work quite closely with called Dimension 10 that work with BIM data. So I can be construction worker, architect and client all in the same virtual construction site, and we can actually save costs and do snagging and prepare before people go on site. So we shouldn't just limit our kind of notion of bringing people together just around kind of meetings and events, but it's also, you know, there's a whole bunch of really, really valuable enterprise use cases where this makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, True, do you have anything you want to add comparing video conferencing?
Especially for social life, if you don't want to do this for professional meetings, say it's hard to drink beers over VR headset. So those kind of stuff is, you know, if you play a piano or you want to do more stuff in front of the people, it's kind of hard. But I do agree with Dave. We shouldn't focusing on those kind of disadvantage. Well, on the advantage side, there's so many other experiences you can create with VR conferencing other than the normal conferencing. Yeah.
Do you have some examples that Unreal you think will be best suited for, that's really give you better experience even than real life?
I want to say this, for example, for professional meetings, Zoom is not just for the professional meetings. We see an increasing needs for people to get together. Like say they want to actually eat dinner together, they want to watch a movie together. So I do see some people, it's very similar to like a big screen. People are sharing something together, watching a soccer game or, you know, watching a movie, horror movie, as if they are in the same room. And those kind of stuff is you can really, you can only enjoy that with VR or AR headsets, not Zoom.
Yeah, I'm actually going to, I think I'm going to bring some of the audience question in, and for that, I'm actually going to bring in Tara, Carlos, and Marco so that they can just start video, and then Tara, is Tara here? Yeah, unmute more. So yeah, Carlos, do you have any questions you want to bring in from the audience?
Yes, we have a few questions, very interesting ones. One of the ones that I thought it was interesting was about telepresence. So Alexandra Keystone asked, what sort of use cases do you envision for these telepresence robots? I'm imagining all these robots running around, which seems a bit wasteful.
I can we had this panel with Professor, I think Tachi from Japan, who's dedicated a few decades on this so-called teleexistence, which means not just telepresence, but also actually his vision of a future society where there's robots everywhere on Earth now. And if you just want to do something in, say, London right now, you just put in a VR goggles or maybe some other devices, start walking around in, I don't know, next to Buckingham Palace, or do some shopping or whatever is open or closed. And, you know, and I asked him in the panel, or after the panel, I asked him, you know, you've been doing this since 1980 something or whatever, and, you know, and it was still so far away. And like, how is it that you spent all your life and we're still so far away from that vision? So I said, first of all, it's very important to have the vision in the end of the road and then start moving backwards so you know where you're going. And also, he was really excited. He said 5G, that's it. 5G is finally going to make this happen. So he's really optimistic. So Tachi from Japan, check out his lab on teleexistence.
Yeah, and also I think for the robot, I can clearly see from a teaching perspective, if a student can't make it to the classroom or, you know, under lockdown, for instance, if when the new term starts, we probably have a policy where we can have on-campus classes, but whoever is coughing or having a temperature shouldn't be coming in. But in that case, instead of just watching videos at home, they can send their social robots in. I think they will give them some level of, you know, being together with us, and also give me the feeling of the students attended the class, yet not, you know, passing germs to other people. So I think that could be one of the user case. Anybody else want to add on this question?
Yes, there's a similar vision to Tachi-san's Sensei's vision, which is the office of the future, which is transferable skill at critical moments. So surgery, remote surgery, expert advice for construction or maintenance, and a very relevant one, right? You know, the UK, as I expect much of the world, has got a lot of elderly people in lockdown, and rather dismaying statistics about the number of people in care homes who have died. So, you know, if that was 5 to 10 years ahead, that would be a primary one, which is care of the elderly. And surrounding Professor Tachi's work is all this work on robotics for supporting aged population in Japan, and Europe is 20 years behind that in terms of demographics, right?
Yeah.
But
oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to add on this point, or should I take another question? Okay, Marco, do you want to ask a question for the?
Yeah, there are a couple of good questions in the form. I'm actually going to use point this one to Anthony in particular, because I know he's got a paper on this, but and then others. But what does the panel think about the use of asymmetric VR for business purposes after COVID, to allow the use of affordances available in video conferencing and in social VR? Sorry, I should have said that's from Caitlin Uverson.
Sure. So this came up on Twitter a couple of days ago. Thanks to Sylvia. So there's something that people are rediscovering at the moment, is that if you have a head-mounted display and you're collaborating in social VR with people that don't have a head-mounted display, then there's a sort of imbalance, and that. As I think Mel famously quoted, mentioned that people that were on a desktop, because they move and slide, they're a bit like Daleks. For those of you who are into old British, actually not old, British sci-fi. But whereas somebody with hands can gesture, I can draw your attention over here very quickly, which is difficult on a desktop display. So that's asymmetric, and there's just has to be acknowledged. People will come up with tools to better enable those types of gestures. So it may be elaborating, maybe some AI system that's taking what I'm doing, I'm clicking on the screen and turning it into sort of more effusive gestures, or exaggerating it, because as trained speakers know, if you want to lead a conversation, you just have to exaggerate a little bit with the gestures and so on. There's another asymmetry, which is that we can fully expect, for example, in a university context, that some of us will go back to work and some of us won't. And therefore there will be people in the office and people and then there will be the equivalent of what used to be the smoking break, which is conversations that take part in parallel, which people don't have access to. So I saw a question on accessibility go past, and that's an issue, right? Is that we will have this asymmetry. There will be key workers or the leaders will be in the office, and that's important to have the sort of social presence and not be asymmetric. So I know this happens because I've talked to one platform provider that's gone into this issue of asymmetry within the platform, but there's also this asymmetry out of it, which is we will undoubtedly end up with situations with remote workers for various reasons, and then how do we support them to give them equal access? And in the long term, that's going to be equal access to career opportunities and so on. So, so that is a concern and something that social VR can help with.
Cool. Marco, do you have any other questions you want to channel through? Oh, does anyone want to add anything?
I was just going to say, just a personal anecdote. I don't think this is quite the kind of the academic answer here, but what was interesting, I had my 40th birthday the other day, and I wanted to do some kind of thing that wasn't just an average quiz on Zoom. So I was like, right, okay, we're all gonna have the party in VR, and then I suddenly realized that none of my friends actually have VR, which is a massive bummer. And I hope this time next year, you know, maybe some of them, you know, literally only a handful of them did. So, but there have been some tools now recently. There's one called Spaces.com that we're building an LBE product, and they've had to pivot. But that allowed for me to go into VR. And I had like a full auditorium with a screen behind me. I could bring objects in. So I was in VR, but I was broadcasting my VR self into Zoom. So it was almost a deliberate asymmetry of like, right, I'm the host of this thing. I'm in a virtual environment. I can bring in teaching materials, or I can bring fun materials for a quiz, or, you know, I have the affordance of being able to do things in a fully virtual world, but actually plug that into a 2D environment. And as I said earlier, I think some of these like bridging solutions are going to be really important, because hopefully then, you know, out of the 40 people on that Zoom, you know, some of them will be like, wow, you can do that in VR. I would love to try that as well. Or it might even be, you know, as we're doing now, we've got a group of people that are in Zoom interacting, but we're actually broadcasting this out to YouTube. So I think one of the actual, you know, new jobs that has been created in the last month has been kind of virtual event producer. I actually, for our event, we actually hired a completely separate team of 3 or 4 people who are kind of trained in classical like TV production skills. And they were tasked with going into the platform with virtual cameras. We had 3 invisible virtual cameramen in the environment, and then they went away and fully produced the 2D event of the virtual event with like different pans and camera views and graphics coming up and things like that. So, you know, we need to think about, how do we make, even if we're in VR, how do we make that kind of 2D experience really accessible? And hopefully that's a funnel to getting more people into the more immersive scenarios.
I think that's what we saw at HIP VR conference as well, right? We had presenters who were presenting on Mozilla Hubs. We're seeing their avatars but zoomed in to the audience. Is that right, Anthony?
Yes, so that was on Mozilla Hubs, which has is again another platform which is easy to get into because it supports web browsers and headsets through WebXR. So that's one of these standards, which is early days, but expanding. And then yes, how you produce content is that can be streamed to other people is a real skill. I know Carl Johnson and his team had a room full of postgraduate students that were sort of inventing this stuff on the fly and coming up with techniques to show things. And again, you'll find some experiments in the literature in the background, especially from the broadcast side. In fact, Marco might remember an experiment at BT in the early 2000s. Though they tried to broadcast game shows from VR. It was terrible television, but it was great VR. But those tools are coming, right? Those tools are coming because, again, from a British point of view, eventually they're going to run out of episodes of our soap operas. Okay, so they're going to have to do something to make content. We haven't got soccer matches. We're watching them from 5-10 years ago. So you know, creative people hopefully will get the tools and haven't already spent all their investors' money to bring things, interesting content, new forms of content.
Chu, do you have anything on that from the AR perspective you want to add in terms of people having different access to device and how do we make it more democratic and equal or not?
No, but I think, we're going to go through a lengthy period where we're going to see various different headsets with different kind of, it's not like if you imagine before iPhone came to the market, all different cell phones, they're slightly different. They have the full keyboard, some of them have, smaller keyboard and some of the gamepad, right? So I think in AR, we might, or AR and VR going forward, we might enter that kind of period. And people will find different use cases, different preference going into their, going into the market. So yeah, it's hard to predict, but I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to having, Unreal glasses and actually having some of the social VR experiences in my room, but having my friends also, together in my room. I think that'd be a great idea. Darren, do you have anything to add on this question? No? Tara, do you want to, chat in a question that you've been looking at from YouTube?
Yeah, sure. We do have one from Immersion Reed Church. Forgive me if I said your name wrong. So their question is, at the end of this lockdown, are you not worried about the desire of users to recover reality and then slow down with the virtual channel?
I want to answer this one very quickly. So I really hope so, because I think there should be a really big difference between fun and work. So for leisure, I hope also my children and grandchildren would love to be together and do stuff in the physical world socially. But for work, I really think, I don't know, I thought it was trivial, but I realized not everyone agrees. A lot of people have realized there's no reason to commute. I understand there's a lot of international large companies who are saying working from home is the default. I think that's a radical change. Okay, radical change. It's not, I think it's going to be huge. It's not just like a little bit of more working from home. And that's where I hope we were going to use VR instead of Zoom and telepresence and AR instead of Zoom. I mean, Zoom is okay, but I think it's a perfect timing to discuss this, by the way, because I think in the first days of lockdown, people are really excited about Zoom and like, wow, we don't really need the physical world. Right now, I think there's a lot of people, even in the non-professionals, who understand they have this Zoom fatigue. They understand the limitations of this Zoom. So I think right now is a perfect time to work on these solutions. Yes, but instead of commuting, environmental reasons, traffic, not for fun. Very simple.
Yeah, anybody else have any point to add on this? No? Yeah, no, actually, I think, you know, as a lot, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so actually my fear is the opposite. Maybe people get used to the virtual kind of virtual channel. I'm not saying just for the VR, but if you look at, say, people watching Netflix instead of watching the movie theaters, and during this period, I actually know a lot of people from the entertainment business. Their fear is people are so used to watching on Netflix, watching YouTube or the other channels, they don't want to go back to the cinema anymore. And this is actually going to take a much longer time for the movie business to get back to the normal business. And also, I heard Twitter today, they announced that they're going to allow their employees to work, you know, remotely, you know, forever if they want to. So this is not going to be the normal case for all the companies, but we do see a lot of technology company will kind of explore that. And if they realize, okay, from the productivity perspective, they're not really reducing, maybe that's a very interesting channel to explore.
Yeah, but I have to say, you know, the kind of work mode we're in now, it has basically evolved over centuries, right? I mean, for tech world, it may be decades. So there might be things we don't see, but we have to be really careful, really, you know, doing this, which leads to another question someone asked me on Twitter yesterday. I can't find the question now, but I remember it is like, what do you know, has there been any sort of really study about how Zoom or VR actually have an impact on our memory or our cognition? And do you have neuroscientists working with you for you know, for Chi and Vive and Dave? Do you have any sort of psychologists you're working with actively exploring the effect of XR devices on people?
Yeah, so was that question for me?
Yeah, for both you and Chi, for the industry people first, and now I'll move on to research because we have a lot to say here as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I don't, I think that those sorts of things are typically happening in HQ, so I'm not close to those topics, so I can't answer accurately. So I would imagine, you know, there'd be an appetite to be able to contribute to other research projects, but I'm not aware of anything specifically inside HTC, but that's not to say that it's not happening.
Yeah, Chi, are you working with any psychologists or neuroscientists?
Well, we're working with some of agencies to making sure this gonna give no harm to the regular customers, and we're, you know, this is very critical, especially we want to launch them. And I think, you know, HTC definitely did the same thing when they launched their product, but we do want to hear what, you know, from a research perspective, how this really affects people, especially in a long-term way.
Yeah, great. Can I just add one more point after I pass it on to Anthony and Darren, who I'm sure have a lot to say. So yesterday, if you haven't seen the talk, it was from Mel Slater about body ownership perception and how embodiment actually changes your cognition, your attitude, and everything. So if you want to know the long-term effect of VR on body, please listen to yesterday's talk first. And there's so much information on that note. But I'm sure Anthony and Darren, you have a lot to say on this as well.
Maybe too much.
I was going to say the same thing.
Maybe it's a topic for a different panel. I'm not sure now. When we're behind time, we should start the discussion of neuroscience of VR, but
I'll just make a quick point, if I can, which is, I mean, Mel talked about embodiment and the impact of that. And I think that there's an aspect to that, which is that if you go into the VR, you can use your body as well as it changing you. And there was a question that's gone past, I'm not sure if we get to test about accessibility. And this is an opportunity, right? That you can use more of the participant's own body in the experience, right, with their own skills, their own knowledge of their body schema and so on. I mean, because you know, we have a paper that basically, and I'll just give you a very controversial spin on it because that'll hopefully pique people's interest in taking it, which is you're better at maths if you have an avatar. Right? If you have an avatar in a VR system, you look down, you can see an avatar, but you're doing maths in your head, you're better at it. Now that's overstating the result, but there is this impact that you're actually. If I do maths, I used to be a mathematician, right? I wave my hands around a lot. If I don't, and that helps me. Right? So that's not just. It's not just that I'm using an interface to do a job which I do. I'm using my body, and the interface is supporting that. Sorry.
And actually, Tara is here. She just ran an experiment which we found something really interesting about, you know, replicating part of your experiment about trust and embodiment, but we're not going to go into the result now here. Carlos, Marco, Tara, do you have any other questions you want to channel in?
There is a question from Louis Chuang. He's asking, should behavioral research be geared towards application-specific instances, for example, social interactions, teleoperations, or generic fidelity, for example, presence? What is the short to long-term impact?
I think the answer is both. There are lots of researchers, in all areas. Anybody else want to address this?
We've done things very specific on applications and very general in the past. I think the main thing is making sure that everybody who's interested in those questions gets the right tools to go and build things and explore. Because yes, we're working on a project with accessibility for people with motor impairments or motor disabilities, and there it's really a case of we get the equipment out to the person who really wants to study that, and it's sort of that's moving things out in these technologies out into communities where that is their main interest, and making it frictionless for those researchers to go and answer those questions. So Dave and G mentioned developers, but actually there's all sorts of researchers that have very specialisms that they want to support as well. So that's my suggestion on that question. Any
other points? Any panelists want to add? Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up because although we're not going to be kicked out, but I think around 4:30 UK time, some of you might have to leave. So I just want to very quickly actually follow on Anthony just talked about in research. So this is a question for researchers. I have another one for industry partners later. But for researchers, one of the challenges we're facing is running user studies, because that's half of what we do. So what do you think about how do we sort of cope with that in the next couple of months or even after the lockdown? Is there any plans or suggestions or thoughts you want to share here?
I just advertised that there's a group of, following the IEEE VR conference, there's a group of VR, AR labs which has got together, and basically we're running each other's experiments to give a pool of people that have the equipment and have the knowledge. Now, they're not your ideal naive participant, but that is itself, it's a crutch we've used in the past to make our experiments work. And I think actually the fact that we're dealing with real people, real users is an opportunity. We've tried to ship apps to consumers in the past. That's an opportunity as well. There are various hurdles to that, recently introduced ones and longer term ones. But we're using our own students and running each other's experiments and then planning to get them out of the lab, which is a positive thing and means that we're going to hit a more diverse population for a start. That isn't engineering and engineering taught engineering students and computer scientists and psychologists. So that's really positive, and I'll be looking for industry support in that, because there's obviously lots of people that really want to do research in those areas.
So as a researcher, how do we join that? Would you put that on Twitter?
I will put it on Twitter. It was organized by Francisco Ortega and I and some others. It's on Slack. There's just a community, and there's a position paper coming out in the Interactions magazine in the next few days.
Darren, do you have any questions to thoughts to add on this?
Well, as I said, we're optimistic. We may actually be opening the lab in early June. I'm still not sure, but we did arrange a pool of like a virtual pool of participants, including, as Anthony said, not only running each other's studies, but also, advertising to students on campus, including handing out, today even with Oculus Go and Pico and even Quests, or, for a loan during the semester. Of course, we also introduced it a little bit into teaching. The content is still not there, but engaging the students in VR this way, and then they get a device on loan for the semester, and then they also, of course, have to take part in experiments. And I don't know, it's like on the one hand, I'm hoping we can open labs soon, but on the other hand, I think it's just like these things, getting used to running remotely. Why not run, even when we're out of Corona, why don't we run some things remotely if we can? So I'm waiting for Anthony to make it much more robust and easy to use and scalable.
So I want to add.
Can I leap in? And I'm not a proper panelist, but I'd just like to name check Carlos, who's on here, who's doing a PhD about movement interaction, and then working with our team on, very, very movement-based, very sort of embodied stuff that, would seem impossible to run remotely. but has done a sterling job of developing protocols both in Rec Room and in on Zoom. But Rec Room seemed very fun, and the use of like random props seemed to help a lot, didn't it, Carlos?
Yeah, so I just want to maybe add 2 points very quickly. First is, I work with psychologists a lot. I think experimental studies is very much about control. And when you actually run it in the wild, people don't do what you expect them to do. So we want to be actually quite careful in treating the data we collected in this method. I wouldn't really trust them, or maybe we'll treat them really separately. I don't know how they contribute to literature in that sense. And the second point is kind of actually related to what Marco just said, that this is actually also opportunity, which provides new ways to run experiment. Actually, there are new challenges, new research questions that are coming out of this lockdown. How do we actually interact with each other in social VR for fun or for business? There are, people can actually redefine their research in this area is really expanding, and lots of those areas can only be addressed with experiment that can be run remotely. So I think that's something I want to add. So now moving to the industry, the question I have for you guys is like, how to make system more accessible to some people who want to engage with social VR now, for Chi and Dave here.
How to make it more accessible? Well, good question.
Like dropping the price.
Yes. Yeah, dropping the price would be nice. No, I mean, one thing to say is, I just want to, thank everyone on the panel and also in the audience. I think there's been a group of us within the community that are really kind of, over the last 2 months have stepped up and started to kind of do more of these experiments in the real world, like, partly out of necessity, but I'm on a couple of groups now, and Silver, I know you're on a couple of groups where people are going out and really kind of road testing some of these platforms. And, there are still a lot of things that we need to get right. There's some really simple things, like Anthony said it, that it's a simple UI implementation to have a button that makes sure that your avatar doesn't go crumpled when you leave the room. So now we've been able to, do those experiments, give those feedback. I think that the platforms that are doing social VR can really step up and make that more appetizing. So, for people with or without headsets, that they can participate in these experiences. And obviously, it's also crucial that the work that, is going on in academia now, that there's more of this happening. So hopefully that can feed into understanding which areas we need to research for the long term as well. So yeah, I think as a community, we're doing a great job at the moment of kind of, breaking things and iterating.
Drew, do you have anything to add? How do we, how much is Unreal? That's actually the top question a lot of people had.
Fortunately, I think it's definitely going to be very affordable and very accessible. But on top of that, I think, the COVID-19 is really offer a golden opportunity for AR and AR, VR and AR. People will have a chance to try them, to have the willingness to try those kind of use cases. And I actually learned, from some other video conferencing company, by COVID-19, they reached their goal for the next 3 years. So that's a big achievement for those companies. But what they are rendering is after COVID-19, how they can really take advantage of this opportunity and keep the customer into this platform. And same thing for VR and AR as well. Say we need to figure out after this opportunity, how can really kind of modify and optimize the whole experience, and making sure we definitely create a lot of new use cases. For example, we really see a true use case and value for remote assistance. Even right after the lockdown, we're still going to see traveling across different countries going to be still going to be a big problem. And how can you use really a remote assistant or a VR and AR headset to provide some support with your technology? Those kind of stuff will keep moving on. And on the other hand, say social conferencing, VR conferencing, how can really modify the experience, making sure they get closer and closer to the Zoom conferencing, or even better in some ways. So that's kind of our job to really make this. And even post COVID-19, people still pray for VR and AR over the actual life. And that's, if that's the case, or you can convert part of the people to do this, and that's going to be a huge win for us.
Great. I think that's a really interesting insight. I actually want to share this one slide. Well, I'm going to ask you what is your final remarks, but I want to also share this slides to really show the point, and VR, XR, and everything is great, but please don't use VR just to impress people, because one day the novelty effect will wear out, and life will resume back to normal, and physical interaction is still more attractive. So that VR is great, but use it with caution, and really, put more effort in understanding the user of it, and make it a better experience rather than just using it for the sake of it. So on that note, I just want to let everybody to give some final remarks, because I don't want to, I know everybody still have their real life to go back to. Yeah, so anyone want to start? Or any questions you want to ask? Actually, I'm as well just allow everyone here on the panel. I think most of us are Frontier panelists. I'm gonna unmute. So if everyone can just come in, I'm gonna bring Mel back in as well. And meanwhile, if anyone has any final remarks.
Yeah, Sylvia, I guess I probably need to put my HTC hat on and make sure I'm giving out a few plugs to end on. So I mentioned a few things during the talk. If anyone's interested in checking out Vive Sync as a simple meetings platform, go to I think it's sync.vive.com to check that out. We also have the last in the series of our kind of virtual events next Thursday. We're doing that in Engage with Immerse UK. And we've got some really interesting panelists lined up to talk about the future of training the workforce in XR. So I posted the link on YouTube. I can post it in Zoom as well. And then, yeah, if anyone's kind of interested in talking, then yeah, you can reach me at Haynes_Dave on Twitter. But if you're a company working on any of these challenges and looking for investment, then happy to help either directly or indirectly by introducing you to other people who might be able to fund your project or business.
Great. Anthony or Eugene? No? Anybody else have any final remarks? Anthony, you're muted.
Sorry, I was prevented from pressing the button. No, I just think if people want to engage in the community, then there's lots of opportunities now. There's a few communities around the sort of academic community, and it's actually been quite disruptive in that we're much more, a bit more open. And there's a couple of places like Slack where there's lots of people discussing how to do research and the protocols and so on. So if you want to just drop me a line on Twitter or an email, I'll happily link people into that.
Cool, great. Duran, you have anything to add?
No, just to remind everyone that we still have a long series of talks and seminars.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Looking forward to hear all the other speakers.
Mm-hmm. Sure, anything? No? So yeah, I just want to, Eugene, do you want to add anything? We have another editor from Frontiers here joining in.
Hi, my name is Eugene Cheng. I am at the University of Nottingham at the China campus, but I have been stranded in Malaysia for the last 5 months, unable to get back. So, but last year we did a lot of experiments, so we are just writing them out. To take note of your comments on making devices accessible, we have been experimenting with a hybrid VR AR connection, so multi-user with different devices, and I believe that will definitely open up. Some people have access to VR devices, others have mobile phones. So if you combine the two, then most people would be able to come together in a hybrid environment. So just a comment.
Yeah, so maybe next time this meeting can be completely in VR with whatever device we all have. That would be amazing. Actually, Mel, we should definitely plan that. Mel, do you want to have some final words here so we can wrap it up? You're muted.
It's a very interesting panel, and thanks very much for the contributions. I think there's a lot to go away and think about. Somebody in the questions did raise the issue of ethics, but I think we probably have to leave that for another time.
Yeah, we should probably have a panel on that in social VR as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Shall I just announce the next meeting? meeting tomorrow, or do
Yes,
you have
please.
more now? Okay, so tomorrow is Carolina Cruz Nera, and she's going to be talking about virtual reality as the new innovation engine. And this is going to be at 6 o'clock, 1800 CEST, Paris, Berlin, Madrid time. So I hope to see many people there again tomorrow.
Yeah, so again, if you want to engage with us, just use a hashtag on Twitter. And there are lots of very interesting resources. We mentioned the Mount panel. Please, let's not stop here. Let's go to Twitter or go to my YouTube channel and put comments there so that, we're kind of still keeping the energy for afterwards as well. And thank you very much. It's a great panel. And I think even, as a researcher, it's a great opportunity for me to actually have a conversation with people from the industry. I always learn a lot when you actually work with people who come from a very different background, but have very similar goals to your own work. So I really enjoyed it. I hope you do as well. And thank you very much. And thanks for everybody from YouTube who have contributed as well. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks
Bye.
to Sylvia.
Bye.
Thanks, Sylvia.
Thank you. Bye.